of your parents or your grandparents being kicked out of their nursing homes.
Yeah, right. Just like, grandma was being pushed off the cliff in a wheelchair and all. I mean, these are famous scare tactics when it comes to health care. But it's both sides. You can't have just one side choosing to say, okay, we're going to be bipartisan. Obamacare was passed 100% partisan vote.
Putting aside what you think of the Republican plan right now and Obamacare, what do you think about Senator McCain's reasons for voting no, or saying he's going to vote no in terms of regular order, having hearings, debate, a budget score?
I mean, that sounds wonderful. That sounds just really nice. But that's not really the way things have been generally going in Washington, particularly on this issue.
Isn't that part of the problem?
It is. But it's both sides. You can't have just one side choosing to say, okay, we're going to be bipartisan. Obamacare was passed 100% partisan vote. There wasn't one Republican that voted for Obamacare. And they just had a little bit larger numbers. So, McCain's, I don't know if McCain's really been paying attention, but there isn't any extension of the hand by Democrats on the other side. The only way they're willing to work with Republicans is if Republicans basically don't do anything of substance to Obamacare at all. Well, that's not actually reaching across the aisle. So McCain's reasoning, I think, is faulty. I think the hearings and all that sounds great, but that wouldn't change anything because the votes are going to be the votes still. The problem that I have, the concern that I have, is that I've been a big defender of John McCain as a person, as a war hero, as an incredible leader in Vietnam, staying at the Hanoi Hilton when he could have left. I mean, there's a lot of great things to say about him. He's a gosh-awful bad Republican senator, and I think he's got a personal grudge with Trump, and it's understandable. Trump said mean things about him, and it looks like every chance he gets, he tries to torpedo the president. And I'm sorry that that may end up being part of his legacy because he's better than that.
Rod, I know you want to respond to that. I also want to point out that according to a new Washington Post ABC News poll, Americans prefer Obamacare to the latest GOP plan by a margin of 56-33.
I would dare those Americans to describe the Graham-Cassidy bill and tell me what's in it. Whenever the status quo is threatened, Americans seem to shift a little bit more in favor. I disagree with Jacob a little bit in that this does not have anything to do with repealing Obamacare. This is tweaking Obamacare. This is totally unsatisfactory for any conservative that wanted to see Obamacare repealed.
Well, Rod, that brings us back to you because some of the debate this week, at least among Democrats, is that even if you offer block grants to the states, you are cutting the amount of dollars for Medicaid and Medicare, and they raise the specter of your parents or your grandparents being kicked out of their nursing homes.
Yeah, right. Just like, grandma was being pushed off the cliff in a wheelchair and all. I mean, these are famous scare tactics when it comes to health care. The problem is a couple-fold here. Number one is we never actually have an honest conversation about the economics of health care and the reality of what we're doing and what it's costing. We're on an unaffordable trajectory. That's part of the reason for trying to block grant to the states, looking for more efficiencies by the states operating these programs, and then cutting it. Because we can't just keep saying, this is a good idea, we should do this, and throw money at it, and this one is, and this one is. And I would like to say that the economics and the reality of pre-existing conditions never gets an honest conversation.
Well, that's another conversation. But the question I had for you is, given what you're saying now, why, after 7 years of Obamacare, didn't the Republicans come into this process with a good plan that was explained? They seem to be making up on the fly here.
Oh, absolutely. So there's a couple problems there. Number one is they were totally unprepared for Trump to win. They ran consistent. This has been one of my big gripes, you may remember, with the Republican Party nationwide on this. They ran consistently about repeal Obamacare, and then at least 7 senators in the last election cycle that were elected by promising to repeal Obamacare have been voting consistently against the repeal Obamacare proposals that have been out there. So, I mean, I was all for primarying these people because I'm sick of that sort of action.
What do you make of this?
It looks like, to myself, and I think a lot of people around the world, it's a chest-thumping insult fest with 2 maniacal leaders that have access to nuclear weapons, and they're starting to look and sound a lot like each other, and that's very scary.
Do you take offense to that?
Maniacal for Trump? Yeah, I take offense at that. Yeah, I mean, he's equating, if you're going to equate Kim Jong-un to Donald Trump, then you're not being reasonable about it at all.
That's what it looks like to the world.
Well, it may look like, well, it doesn't look like it to the whole world. It looks like it to a portion of the world. The problem here is that in North Korea, we've had multiple administrations by multiple parties that have kicked the can down the road. Now we have an increasingly heavily nuclearized, unstable country threatening us and all. If they do, I think if his statement at the UN was that if they were to fire off, if they were to attack the U.S. or an ally, or if they were to threaten, which I think a missile with a hydrogen bomb into the ocean might be that, then we would destroy them. That is a restatement of U.S. policy for multiple administrations now regarding North Korea. So that's not crazy. When he says Rocket Man, that's just stupid Trump stuff. I wish he wouldn't do that because rhetoric does matter. But as far as the substance of what he's talking about there, it is completely consistent.
Facebook.
Facebook?
Yeah.
What?
I mean, that was the other issue, that Facebook is now handing over to the special prosecutor some 3,000 ads placed by Russian entities, and that's where the dollars to donuts come in if they can find out whether the Russians or Russian entities did that with any kind of direction from U.S. sources.
Oh, right. So I don't know. I don't know what we'll find. Manafort strikes me as somebody that's kind of been a little bit dirty all along, and as soon as Trump figured that out, he fired him. My concern with the special prosecutor is that, number one, it's looking more and more like a fishing expedition that has expanded far beyond looking for Russian collusion. Number two, more and more people on my side of the worldview are not trusting it because of all of the Clinton and Obama attorneys that are as part of his team.
Frank, I want to ask you about that because very often if you hear other political pundits on TV, they're saying, well, you know, this investigation has been underway for more than a year now. There has been no evidence of collusion. But, you know, as somebody who's covered criminal prosecutions, I know that criminal prosecutions can take an awful long time before you get to the real answer.
Correct, and if this was your normal local criminal prosecution, you would say, we don't know anything yet. I mean, the media, the rest of us wouldn't know anything yet. But this has been, leaks hardly says it, this has been burst valves, you know, of information. So much has been leaked so constantly. My suspicion is that there really probably isn't that much there that can be actually tied to Trump. Whether you can tie some things to his team like Flynn and Manafort, that's possible. But to Trump himself seems probably unlikely. What it is going to do, like Frank was saying, is I think it hurts both the credibility of the investigation and it hurts the ability of the Trump administration to carry out its presidential duties.